Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. They laughed as the janitor slipped on the floor she had just cleaned. One of them, a young executive in a designer suit, pointed at her and said, "Maybe stick to mopping. It's all you're good for." The others roared with laughter, phones out, filming her humiliation like it was entertainment. Elena Rossi didn't reply. She simply straightened, wiped the water from her face, and continued scrubbing. She learned long ago that silence can be louder than anger, especially when your husband taught you that patience can be deadlier than bullets. To them, she was invisible. Just another tired cleaner in gray overalls. But to the city's underworld, her last name was whispered like a threat. They didn't know that every contract in that building, every delivery truck, every piece of polished marble existed because her husband allowed it to. So when that video reached his hands, when he saw the men who mocked his wife, the most feared name in the city quietly decided the entire tower would crumble. Not with gunfire, but with silence. And when he was finished, the men who laughed at her would beg to work the floors she once cleaned. This is the story of a janitor they thought was powerless, and the man who proved that power doesn't always wear a suit. 2 nights before the incident, Elena had started her first shift at Marble Crest Tower, a place she thought would finally give her peace, not pain. 2 nights. Earlier, the city never truly slept, but at 10 p.m., Marble Crest Tower hummed in a quieter rhythm. The daytime staff had gone, leaving only the security lights glowing along the marble lobby and the faint echo of Elena's mop swishing across the floor. She liked the stillness. After years of noise, sirens, phone calls, whispered threats she'd overheard but never asked about, the silence was a balm, a second chance. The scent of lemon polish mixed with the crisp chill of the air conditioning. Her reflection followed her in the glass walls. Petite frame, careful movements, the faint shadow of a woman who once wore silk but now tied her hair with an elastic band. Her supervisor, Mr. Clint, had given her the look everyone gave janitors, half acknowledgement, half dismissal. "Keep the lobby spotless," he'd said without meeting her eyes. "The execs like to see themselves in the floor." "Yes, sir," she had replied softly. He didn't know that years ago that same soft tone had once calmed men twice his size. Elena had chosen this job deliberately, something simple, something that didn't involve blood, secrets, or power. When Enzo told her she could do whatever she wanted now that business had quieted, she'd chosen this, the clean, anonymous piece of honest work. No bodyguards, no luxury. Just a bucket, a mop, and hours where she could think. As the elevator chimed, she paused, expecting another cleaner. Instead, a group of young executives spilled out, laughter echoing, suits gleaming like polished armor. Their watches caught the lobby light. Their arrogance filled the space faster than their voices. She lowered her gaze. People like that never saw janitors anyway. "Still working, sweetheart?" one of them asked, tone dripping with mock charm. "Yes, sir. Almost done," she murmured. "Good. Make it shine. We've got guests tomorrow." Another nudged his friend, smirking. "Can't have her missing a spot. What if the CEO slips?" More laughter. They didn't even realize she was older than some of their mothers. Elena said nothing. She dipped the mop again, rhythmic strokes like prayer. Her hands had learned discipline before most of them had learned taxes, but their laughter kept slicing through the quiet like shards of glass. A paper cup fell near her feet, an accident, followed by more chuckles. Then one of them, emboldened by the attention, nudged her bucket with his shoe, splashing soapy water onto the pristine floor. Oops, he said. Her foot slid, body twisting, knees hitting the marble. Pain shot through her leg. A burst of laughter erupted around her, sharp and echoing against the stone. Phones lifted. Cameras blinked. For one suspended moment, Elena stared at her reflection in the puddle, a distorted face, lips pressed tight, pride fighting tears. Then she drew a long breath, rose slowly, and picked up her mop. She didn't curse. She didn't plead. She simply began to clean again. A hush rippled through the group, uncomfortable now with how calm she was. "Come on, let's go," one muttered, voice faltering. "She's fine." When they finally left, Elena finished her section, replaced the water, and clocked out. No witnesses spoke up. No one ever did. But one woman, a new cleaner named Rita, caught up to her in the hallway. "I'm sorry," Rita whispered, eyes darting toward the elevators. I recorded it. What they did, someone should know." Elena's gaze softened. "Delete it, Kara. Trouble isn't worth the truth." Rita hesitated. "You sure?" Elena smiled faintly, sadness hiding behind it. "Some things fix themselves." Rita didn't delete it. Home, 11:47 p.m. The apartment smelled of basil and warm tomato sauce. Enzo Rossi sat at the small kitchen table, sleeves rolled, reading the newspaper. The lamplight threw gold across the tattoos winding up his forearm, marks that once made men flinch but now just made him look older, quieter. "You're late," he said softly, without looking up. "Extra floor," Elena replied, hanging her coat. He studied her face, saw the faint bruise near her knee. "You fell?" "Wet marble," she said. "Clumsy me." He nodded slowly. That single hum carried 1,000 memories, gunfire, negotiations, betrayals. He didn't press. Instead, he stood, took her hand, and guided her to the table. "Eat," she did. They talked about simple things, groceries, weather, neighbors. But later, when she showered, Enzo's phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number. A link. He opened it. The screen showed the lobby, Elena's small figure slipping, the laughter, the camera flashes. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. When she returned, hair damp, he was already outside on the balcony, city lights burning behind him. "Elena," he said quietly, "who are those men?" "I told you, it's nothing." He turned, eyes cold now, voice calm. "Nothing is something when it touches you?" She stepped closer, touching his arm. "Promise me, Enzo, no trouble." He looked at her a long time, then kissed her forehead. "Of course." But as soon as she slept, he dialed one number. No name saved, just Il Capo's line. "Get me everything on Marble Crest Tower," he said. "Start tonight." And that was how silence began to move. Slow, invisible, unstoppable. By the time the city woke, the ground beneath Marble Crest had already started to crack. The next evening, the building breathed a different air. Louder, richer, perfumed with power and champagne. Marble Crest Tower's 32nd floor glittered with gold drapes and white light. The company was celebrating its new merger. From the service corridor, Elena could hear the laughter before she saw the people making it. She pushed her cart through the polished hallway, careful not to let the wheels squeak. Her section tonight was the mezzanine just outside the ballroom, close enough to catch fragments of conversations she would rather not hear. "To Falcon and Hale! To endless profit!" Crystal glasses clinked. Applause thundered. The sound crawled down the corridor and into her chest. She inhaled, straightened her spine, and kept mopping. The floor already shone, but that wasn't the point. Cleaners kept busy so they wouldn't be noticed. It worked, until the doors burst open. "Careful, gents," a voice boomed. We've got the cleaning crew working overtime for us. Brandon Hale stepped out first. Tall, movie-handsome, confidence sharpened into cruelty. Champagne sparkled in his glass. Behind him followed 3 executives, all youth and arrogance in expensive suits. Elena lowered her gaze. "Evening, sir," she said softly. He looked her over as if she were part of the decor. "You missed a spot," he said. She checked the marble. Flawless. "I'll fix it," she murmured. He smiled at his friends. "You hear that? She'll fix it. Maybe we should give her more to fix." A half-drunk man in a navy suit tipped his glass. Champagne splashed near her shoes. Laughter. "Oops. Another spot." Elena's hand tightened around the mop handle. She could almost hear Enzo's voice in her head. "Breathe. Don't let them know they've drawn blood." She bent to wipe it. "See?" Brandon said. Perfect obedience. Maybe she should teach my assistant. More laughter, loud enough to echo through the corridor. The smell of alcohol mixed with the citrus of floor cleaner. Heavy and nauseating. Elena kept her movements even, but the laughter pressed closer, meaner. Her supervisor, Mr. Clint, appeared from the elevators. Relief flickered, briefly. "Sir," she began quietly, "could you—" He didn't let her finish. "Everything all right here, Mr. Hale?" "Couldn't be better," Brandon said, grinning. "We're just making sure she earns that paycheck." Clint gave a nervous chuckle. Of course. Elena, lighten up, yeah? They're having fun. Don't spoil the mood." The words landed harder than the laughter. Lighten up, as if dignity weighed too much. She nodded. "Yes, Mr. Clint." The men clapped, pleased with their own kindness. Brandon drained the rest of his champagne and handed her the empty glass. "Since you're down there, sweetheart, mind taking this too?" She took it, placed it on the cart. Her silence unsettled him. His grin faltered. So he pushed further. "Tell you what," he said, grabbing her mop bucket. "Let's make sure the floor really shines." Before she could stop him, he tipped it slightly. Dirty water sloshed onto the marble, gray and soapy. The crowd burst into laughter again, phones flashing. "Guess you'll need to start over," someone shouted. The cold water seeped into her shoes. Elena stared at it for a heartbeat, long enough for them to see the steadiness in her eyes. Then she knelt and began cleaning the mess he'd made. The ballroom doors opened. Music swelled. People peered out, whispering. None intervened. They watched as a janitor mopped around their CEO's shoes. When she finished, she wrung the mop, pushed the bucket aside, and whispered, "Excuse me." Her voice was calm, almost kind. That unnerved them more than if she'd shouted. Brandon forced another laugh. "No hard feelings, right? It's just a joke." She didn't answer. She simply picked up her cart and walked toward the elevators. Behind her, the laughter stumbled into awkward silence. In the staff corridor, Rita waited. Her phone trembled in her hands. The screen still recorded. "Elena," she said, voice small. I filmed it. The whole thing." Elena froze. "You shouldn't have." "They can't treat you like that," Rita said. "People need to see." Elena looked at the younger woman, wide-eyed, furious, innocent. She saw her own younger self there, the one who still believed in justice without consequence. "Keep it safe," Elena said softly. "But don't show anyone yet?" Rita frowned. "Why not?" "Because," Elena replied, pushing the cart toward the exit. "Some dirt doesn't stay hidden forever. You just have to wait for the rain." Outside, the night air wrapped around her like a shroud. She stood beneath the bright logo of Marble Crest Tower, watching her reflection shimmer in the glass doors. Behind those walls, they were still laughing. Inside her chest, something older and colder than shame began to stir. She removed her gloves, folded them neatly. and whispered again, almost to herself, "Some dirt doesn't stay hidden forever." Then she walked into the darkness, leaving a trail of wet footprints that glimmered briefly before fading into the city's silence. The walk home was short, but the night stretched long. The city hummed under its neon skin, horns, murmurs, the rattle of late buses, a kind of restless pulse that followed Elena all the way to her street. She moved through it like a ghost, the humiliation from Marblecrest still clinging to her uniform. Every sound felt sharper: laughter from a nearby bar, a car door slamming, the metallic echo of her own footsteps. By the time she reached the small apartment she shared with her husband, the world had quieted. Only the hum of the fridge and the soft notes of a radio playing an old Italian song greeted her. Inside, Enzo Rossi sat at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a plate of steaming pasta in front of him. He wasn't reading or scrolling, just sitting, thoughtful, fork turning idly through his food. The lamp above him threw a ring of light across his shoulders, outlining the tattoos half hidden beneath his shirt cuffs. Faded black lines that once told stories few survived to hear. He looked up as she entered, a slow smile touching his mouth. "You're late," he said, voice calm and deep. Elena hung her coat on the chair. "They added another floor to clean," she murmured. "It's fine." He studied her. His gaze wasn't sharp like a knife. It was heavy, patient, the kind that weighed truth without needing words. "You're limping," he said. She glanced down, realizing her shoe was still damp from earlier. "Just tired," she replied quickly. "Long shift." He nodded once, no argument, no suspicion, but his eyes stayed on her a second too long. He'd built an empire on reading faces. Hers was the only one he could never fully decipher. Dinner passed in easy silence. The radio hummed, forks clinked against porcelain. The outside world shrank away. For anyone watching, they looked like any married couple, calm, ordinary, unremarkable. That was the genius of it. "Did you eat at work?" he asked. "Not really," she said. "I wasn't hungry." "You should be," he said quietly, reaching for her hand. "You burn too much and replace too little." His thumb brushed over her palm, calloused from years of holding something far heavier than a mop. "You've always been good at cleaning up other people's messes," he said with a faint smile. She smiled back, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Some messes never end." He tilted his head. "Then you let me handle them." Her heart skipped, a tremor behind her ribs. He said it casually, but there was weight beneath the words. She changed the subject. After dinner, Enzo cleared the dishes while she showered. It was a quiet ritual of theirs, a strange domestic rhythm that belonged more to love than fear. Yet even here, in their tiny kitchen, the world seemed to bend around him. Downstairs, neighbors sometimes stopped talking when they heard his voice. Delivery drivers never asked for tips. The men who smoked by the corner store straightened up when he passed. He wasn't cruel. He was known. Everyone in the city knew the name Rossi, though few dared to say it aloud. To Elena, he was simply Enzo, the man who still brought her coffee in bed, who never raised his voice, who hummed while shaving. But to everyone else, he was Il Fantasma, the ghost, the one who had once ended wars between families without firing a single bullet. People whispered that if Enzo Rossi moved, cities trembled. But that life was over. He'd promised her that. Elena emerged from the shower, hair damp, wearing an old robe. He was sitting on the couch now, reading the news on his phone. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "Long shift," she repeated. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll warm the bed. Come soon, see?" She kissed his cheek, soft and brief. "I will." He lingered a second longer, eyes tracing the faint bruise near her ankle, but didn't ask again. Enzo had learned that silence sometimes told him more than confessions ever could. She fell asleep almost instantly. The clock ticked past midnight, the room filled with the low hum of the city outside, a motorcycle revving, a siren in the distance, wind tugging at the curtains. Then her phone buzzed, one vibration, then another. Enzo, still awake, reached for it automatically. The screen lit up with a name he didn't recognize. Rita. Work. A single message. A video file. Caption: You deserve to know what they did to you. He hesitated, thumb hovering above the play icon. Then he pressed it. The footage was shaky, grainy, phone quality, under bright lobby lights. He saw Elena, small, careful, cleaning the floor. Then the men, laughing, pointing. One of them, Brandon Hale, poured dirty water near her feet. The rest jeered. Enzo's hand tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening. His breath stilled. The room seemed to shrink until only that image existed, his wife kneeling in humiliation while the world laughed. The video ended with her walking away in silence. He replayed the last 3 seconds twice. The way she held her head high, the flicker of restrained fury in her eyes. That calm, he recognized it. It was the same look she'd worn years ago when he'd found her standing over the ashes of everything they'd escaped. He placed the Chios phone gently on the table. His reflection on the black screen didn't blink. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. He stood, walked to the balcony, and lit a cigarette. From up here, the city stretched out like a constellation of promises and debts. The wind tugged at his shirt. Smoke curled like ghosts around his face. He took out his own phone, older, darker, unregistered, and dialed a number from memory. 1 ring, 2. Then a man answered, voice groggy. Boss? Enzo's tone was even, measured, cold. Get me everything on Brandon Hale, tonight. A pause, then a quiet intake of breath on the other end. Understood. Enzo ended the call, exhaled once, and looked out over the skyline. From this height, Marble Crest Tower glowed like a blade catching moonlight, tall, sharp, proud. He'd built half of it under silent partnerships. He knew every permit, every contractor, every shipment that passed through those doors. And tomorrow, those same doors would open to something no one in that tower could see coming. He stubbed out the cigarette and went back inside where Elena slept, unaware of the storm she had set in motion simply by enduring it. He brushed a hand over her hair, whispered, You won't clean another man's mess again, amore. Then he turned off the lamp. Outside, somewhere deep in the city, phones began to ring, quietly, urgently, carrying the ghost's first order in years. The ghost had awakened. The city slept uneasily that night, across its steel veins, through ports, warehouses, and glass towers. Messages began to move. Calls were made on encrypted lines. Bank accounts flickered open and shut. And in the quiet between midnight and dawn, men who hadn't heard from the ghost in years suddenly found their phones vibrating. By sunrise, the name Enzo Rossi was whispering through the underworld again. Inside his office, a nondescript room above an old shipping dock, Enzo sat at a long oak table surrounded by his lieutenants. No one spoke until he did. The hum of industrial fans filled the air, blending with the steady clatter of cranes outside. Enzo's jacket was off, sleeves rolled. His hair was still damp from the shower, but his eyes carried the same calm weight that had once made rivals kneel before him. In front of him, a tablet glowed with Brandon Hale's profile, the CEO's smile frozen in a photo from a recent magazine cover. Falcon Dynamics redefining corporate excellence. Enzo tapped the screen once. Tell me, he said quietly. A younger man stepped forward, Luca, his right-hand strategist. His voice was steady, rehearsed. Brandon Hale, 37, CEO for 5 years, owns 12% of Falcon Dynamics directly, another 20 through shadow funds. The rest belongs to investors, many of them ours. Enzo raised a brow. Ours? Luca nodded. Through 3 shell companies you set up years ago for the Marble Crest Project, Castor Holdings, Eterna Group, and Blue Harbor Investments. They handle Falcon's logistics, supply routes, and half their construction permits. Across the table, Matteo, older, heavier, once a soldier, now turned advisor, gave a low whistle. So, the man insults your wife inside a tower you practically own. A faint smile touched Enzo's lips. Irony has a sense of humor. He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Continue. Luca swiped through a series of reports. He's leveraged, deeply. Loans through small banks tied to politicians we assist. His lifestyle exceeds his pay. And the new Marble Crest expansion, it's already bleeding money. Enzo's gaze darkened with interest. Why? Delays, material costs. He cut ties with our transport subsidiary last quarter, thought he could save money using an independent supplier. They're unreliable. If we pull a few strings, his deliveries stop entirely. Enzo's silence was approval enough. He stood and walked to the window. From here, he could see the cranes swaying over the port like skeletal giants. Below, trucks moved in and out under his watch, a choreography of obedience. Every container, every shipment, every custom signature flowed through his network. Not through violence, but through permission. The world believed Enzo Rossi had retired, that the ghost had vanished into domestic life. But the truth was simpler. He'd only gone quiet, and quiet men are the hardest to trace. He turned back to the room. "Show me the map," he said. Luca projected a digital chart onto the wall, lines crisscrossing between companies, politicians, and offshore accounts. Falcon Dynamics sat at the center, like a fly trembling in a web. "This," Enzo murmured, tracing the lines with his hand, "is how you end a man without lifting a gun. You make him invisible to his own power. You take away the things he doesn't even know you control." Matteo leaned forward, eyes sharp. "We can have his accounts frozen within a week. Or," he hesitated, "we can make an example." Enzo turned, expression unreadable. "An example?" "Blood sends a clearer message," Matteo said. "They mocked your wife. The men in that video." "We'll choke on silence," Enzo interrupted. His voice was soft, but it silenced the room. He walked back to the table, eyes cold as winter steel. "No bullets, no noise. They don't deserve fire, only erasure. We end them the same way they humiliated her. Publicly, but quietly. Let the world think it was business." Luca exchanged a look with Matteo, then nodded. "Understood. I'll start cutting Falcon's supply lines." "Not yet," Enzo said. "We do this like a slow leak. One contract canceled, one partner withdrawn, one investor suddenly unavailable." He paused. "They will feel the walls closing before they even see the door." As the meeting went on, his empire unfolded like clockwork. At the ports, shipments tied to Falcon's materials would begin random inspections. In finance, a quiet call would move investment capital elsewhere, leaving Hale's accounts dry. The union workers on his sites, all under Rossi influence, would report safety concerns, halting operations. And in media, a friendly journalist would discover whispers of corruption. Enzo's orders were simple, surgical, almost elegant. No shouting, no threats. Just a chain of whispers that would topple a man who thought he was untouchable. His empire moved without visible gears because everyone owed him something. The dockmasters who controlled shipments, the bankers who approved loans, the politicians who pretended not to know his name. Even the air in this city seemed to move at his permission. By mid-afternoon, the room had emptied. Only Enzo remained, the last tendrils of smoke curling from his ashtray. He stared at the paused frame on the tablet, Elena on her knees, mop in hand, while laughter filled the air. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small photo, a still image from the video Rita had sent, and folded it neatly, placing it inside his breast pocket. That picture wasn't rage, it was fuel. He whispered to himself, "They thought she was cleaning dirt. They didn't realize she was standing on mine." A soft knock came at the door. Luca stepped back in, cautious. "Boss, one more thing. The man who poured the water, Brandon Hale, he's hosting a board dinner tomorrow at the Linton Hotel." Enzo looked up. "Good. Have them seat him near the window." Luca frowned. "Why?" Enzo smiled faintly. "Because the higher they sit, the longer they fall." That evening, as dusk swallowed the skyline, Enzo returned home. Elena was reading by the window, unaware of the silent storm spreading beneath the city. He stood for a long time, just watching her. The woman who had walked through humiliation with grace, who had never asked him for revenge, but whose pain now echoed through every deal he struck. "Long day?" she asked softly without looking up. "Just business," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Nothing you need to worry about." But as he held her, his hand brushed against the folded photo in his pocket, a quiet reminder of why the ghost had stepped back into the light. And somewhere across town, Brandon Hale toasted to his success, unaware that the empire beneath his feet was already hollowing out. It started with a phone call. One of Falcon Dynamics' freight shipments had been misplaced at the port. 20 containers of imported glass panes for Marble Crest Tower, gone without explanation. Brandon Hale brushed it off at first, assuming it was a clerical error. But by the next day, the story changed. Customs delays, paperwork issues, a temporary audit. By the third day, another call came, this time from the finance department. The company's credit line had been suspended pending internal review, and by the end of the week, 3 of Falcon's major investors had quietly pulled their funding. No one knew why. The cracks didn't thunder through his empire. They whispered, like fractures in fine marble, too faint to see until the whole thing began to split. Brandon slammed the phone on his desk. "What do you mean the trucks didn't leave?" he barked. His assistant flinched. "They said the drivers are on strike," she murmured. "Something about unpaid wages." "Unpaid?" He stood, eyes blazing. "That's impossible. We paid the union last month." She hesitated. Apparently, the payment bounced. Brandon froze. For a man who thrived on control, the word bounced hit like a slap. He turned to the window. The skyline gleamed outside, his tower of success catching the morning light. But even from here, he could feel it, the tremor running beneath everything he'd built. "Find out what's going on," he snapped. "Now!" Across the city, in a marble-floored hallway Elena polished every morning, the mood had shifted. Executives whispered as they passed. Meetings ran late. The usually loud, confident Brandon now stormed through corridors like a man being followed by shadows. The other janitors noticed. "Someone's in trouble?" muttered Rita one morning as they mopped the east wing. Elena didn't answer. She'd heard the same rumors. Frozen accounts, angry investors, security reviews. The company was unraveling from within. And yet, she said nothing. She'd learned long ago to exist beneath notice. Keep your head down, do your job, stay invisible. Still, a strange unease sat in her chest. The timing felt uncanny. She caught her reflection in the polished marble. Tired eyes, worn hands. the same woman who'd been humiliated right here weeks ago. Now the laughter was gone. The floor was quiet. Even the executives avoided the janitor's eyes. Maybe it was karma. Or maybe, she thought, some dirt really doesn't stay hidden forever. That evening, Elena returned home with the faint smell of lemon polish clinging to her skin. The lights were low, dinner warm on the table. Enzo was already there, reading the paper, expression calm as ever. "Hard day?" he asked, pouring her a glass of wine. She shrugged. "Just strange. People are tense. The company's falling apart, I think." He raised a brow, feigning mild surprise. "Oh?" She nodded, sitting opposite him. Brandon Hale looked like he hadn't slept in days. I almost felt sorry for him. Enzo's smile was small, almost tender. Men who live on glass towers forget they're standing on sand. She frowned lightly. That sounds like something my grandmother would say. He chuckled. Wise woman, then. The radio played softly in the background, filling the silence between them. She ate slowly, lost in thought, unaware of the subtle satisfaction behind her husband's calm. "How's your friend, the one from work? Rita?" he asked casually. "She's fine. She's been kind to me," Elena said. "But she says the company's doomed, that someone's pulling strings." Enzo took a sip of his wine. "People love conspiracy when they can't explain failure." "Maybe," she said. "But still, it's strange how fast things fall apart." Enzo looked at her for a moment, his voice low, almost reverent. "Nothing falls apart, Amore. Things only return to who truly owns them." She didn't understand what he meant. Not fully. But there was something comforting in his certainty, in the way he said it as though the world had rules she didn't need to worry about. Meanwhile, at Falcon Dynamics, panic was spreading like fire behind glass. Shipments continued to stall. Suppliers suddenly reviewed contracts. The IT department reported cyber issues. The media began circling, small blogs first, then larger outlets, whispering about financial inconsistencies and anonymous reports of mismanagement. Brandon's board demanded answers he didn't have. He sat in his office late that night, sleeves rolled, hair undone. The once pristine man now looked ragged, desperation clouding his confidence. His assistant entered, holding a stack of papers. "Sir, the bank just froze our primary account." Brandon looked up slowly. "What?" "They said there were irregularities. They're investigating. We can't access payroll." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Brandon stood abruptly, grabbed his glass of scotch and hurled it against the wall. The shards scattered across the polished floor, a cruel echo of the laughter that once filled this room. He turned toward the window, the same view Elena once cleaned. Now it reflected only his fury. "Who's doing this to me?" he hissed. His reflection didn't answer. But somewhere across the city, in a dimly lit study overlooking the same skyline, Enzo Rossi folded a newspaper open to the business page. Headline: Falcon Dynamics faces internal collapse amid scandal rumors. He read it in silence, expression unreadable, then placed the folded photo of Elena back into his pocket. The city thrummed softly outside, unaware that its balance of power had just shifted, one quiet move at a time. He poured himself a drink and whispered into the stillness, "Some cracks never stop once they start." The fall of Falcon Dynamics didn't come with explosions or scandals at first. It came with silence. The kind of silence that eats away at a man's confidence until even the sound of his own heartbeat feels like betrayal. Within 3 weeks, the empire Brandon Hale had built began to crumble in broad daylight. The first blow came from the markets. Falcon's stock plummeted 12%. Overnight after a data leak revealed inconsistencies in their project budgets. No one knew who leaked it and no one could trace it. Investors fled like birds before a storm. Then came the banks. Loans that had always been renewed without question were suddenly under review. The firm's main credit line was suspended. Payroll bounced again. Contractors refused to deliver materials without advance payment. By the time Brandon noticed that one of Falcon's biggest partners, Blue Harbor Investments, had pulled all funding, it was already too late. The company he'd mocked as small-time logistics had quietly bought out Falcon's debts through proxies. Brandon didn't know it yet, but he'd been strangled by invisible hands that moved faster than his own greed. Across the city, Enzo Rossi watched it all unfold with the calm of a man adjusting chess pieces. He sat in the corner booth of a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor, espresso in hand, a folder open before him. Across from him sat a man in a crisp suit, the deputy mayor. "You understand, Enzo," the official said cautiously. "If Falcon goes under, half the construction contracts will fall with it." Enzo stirred his coffee slowly. "Then perhaps it's time for new leadership, men who pay their workers, respect their people. You'll need investors who can stabilize the chaos." The official frowned. "And where would I find such investors?" Enzo smiled faintly. "I can make introductions." He slid a thin envelope across the table. A list of companies, all clean, all owned by subsidiaries of the Rossi network. The official hesitated, glanced around, and pocketed it without another word. Enzo leaned back. "Stability isn't born from wealth," he said softly. "It's born from respect. Remember that when they start asking questions." Later that week, Enzo met with two bankers in a quiet office high above the city. One of them, a gray-haired man with trembling hands, whispered, "Mr. Rossi, if we push this foreclosure through, Falcon will be finished." Enzo's tone was mild. "Falcon finished itself. You're simply ensuring order." He paused, setting his pen down. "You'll be rewarded for your cooperation. Discretion, as always, is expected." The banker nodded, throat dry. Everyone in that room knew who truly ran the city's veins, and it wasn't the men whose names appeared in headlines. Meanwhile, at Marble Crest Tower, tension had reached a fever pitch. The once bustling lobby was quiet, executives rushing past without smiles. Rumors spread faster than the cleaning staff could keep up. Layoffs, investigations, audits. Elena and Rita scrubbed the marble floors in silence, the sound of their mops echoing through the vast hall. When Rita finally spoke, her voice was low. "They say the company's under investigation for money laundering. The CEO might be forced to resign." Elena looked up, surprised. "Already?" Rita nodded. "People are scared. Everyone's talking about who's next. Even the manager who laughed that day. He didn't show up this morning." Elena's heart twisted. She felt a strange mix of pity and justice. She didn't like seeing people lose their livelihoods, the secretaries and guards who'd done nothing wrong. But she couldn't summon sympathy for the men who'd humiliated her, who'd treated others as disposable. She pressed her mop into the bucket and said quietly, "Maybe it's time the floor was cleaned properly." Rita gave her a look, half confusion, half admiration. "You've changed, Elena. You sound strong." Elena smiled faintly. "Maybe I just stopped apologizing for existing." That night, she returned home late. Enzo was waiting at the table again. Same calm, same glass of red wine. "How was work?" he asked. "Strange," she said. "The whole place feels cursed. People are scared, whispering about arrests and lost contracts." He poured her a drink, eyes soft. "Don't be scared for them, Amore. Sometimes destruction is the only way something clean can be built again." She sighed, resting her head on his shoulder. I just hope the right people learn something from it." Enzo looked at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. "They already are." Across town, Brandon Hale's office had transformed into a war zone of paperwork and unanswered calls. His phone rang constantly, investors demanding explanations, lawyers advising damage control, journalists asking for statements. He barked orders, slammed desks, threatened lawsuits. But the walls were closing in. Every contract he touched turned to dust. Every phone number he called ended in no comment. His board members began to resign one by one, citing irreconcilable differences. Then the investigators came, clean suits, calm smiles, badges gleaming. They asked for documents Brandon hadn't touched in years. They used words like permit fraud and financial misconduct. By the end of the meeting, his lawyers looked pale. "This doesn't make sense," Brandon muttered, pacing. "We've done nothing wrong." The lead investigator simply replied, "That's what they all say." A week later, the final blow arrived. A plain envelope sat on Brandon's desk when he entered his office. No logo, no return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. He unfolded it slowly, expecting another demand, another threat. But instead, it was a legal notice. Formal, precise, notice of foreclosure. He read it twice, eyes darting to the signature line at the bottom. Authorized by Eterna Group Holdings. The name rang a faint bell. He'd seen it before, years ago on the early contracts for Marble Crest Tower. He'd laughed then, calling them a small-time investment firm lucky to work with us. Now that same company owned his tower, his assets, his name. He sat, heavily in his chair, the weight of realization pressing into his chest. He picked up the paper again, tracing the embossed seal beneath the signature. Rossi Holdings. He whispered it aloud, voice breaking. "Rossi." The silence that followed was deafening. He looked out at the city, the skyline he'd once ruled over, and saw only glass and smoke. The empire he'd built on arrogance had been reclaimed, not by force, but by patience. Somewhere, he knew, someone was watching. Someone who had waited. Someone he should never have underestimated. The letter slipped from his fingers to the floor. The storm had broken over Falcon Dynamics. The company that once hosted champagne galas now sat in a building half empty, its marble halls echoing with footsteps of auditors instead of applause. Brandon Hale hadn't slept in days. The shadows under his eyes were darker than the suits he wore, and the arrogance that once filled his posture had curdled into rage. This morning was supposed to be his redemption. He'd called an emergency meeting with the last remaining investors, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his sinking ship. But as he stormed into the boardroom, chest heaving, voice ready to bark orders, he froze. Someone was already sitting at the head of the table. The man was immaculate. Black suit, white shirt, open at the collar, no tie, no visible tension. His posture radiated ownership, not arrogance, the calm weight of a man used to command. The board members, who usually scrambled to greet Brandon, now sat silent, their eyes fixed on the stranger. Brandon blinked, his voice breaking through the uneasy quiet. "Who the hell are you? This is my company's private meeting." The stranger turned his head slowly, eyes the color of old steel. "Is it?" His accent was faintly Italian, the syllables smooth, deliberate. He reached for a folder on the table, flipped it open, and pushed a few papers toward Brandon. Brandon snatched them up. His gaze darted over the first page. Stock acquisition agreements, board transfers, voting rights, the signatures were all there, legal, irrefutable. His stomach dropped. "What is this?" he demanded. "Ownership," the man replied simply. "As of this morning, Eterna Group, which you may know as a Rossi subsidiary, holds 72% of Falcon Dynamics. That makes me your majority shareholder." A stunned murmur rippled across the table. The investors avoided Brandon's eyes. He felt the blood rush to his face. "This is a setup," Brandon spat. "You can't just buy my company out from under me." Enzo Rossi's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't buy it from you, Mr. Hale. I bought it after you buried it in debt and corruption. I just swept up the pieces." Brandon slammed his fists against the table. "This is revenge, isn't it? For that stupid video? For that—" He stopped, realization dawning too late. "You—" Enzo's eyes darkened, not with rage but with a patient, haunting calm. "My wife," he said quietly, "was the woman you mocked in this very building. You spilled filth at her feet and called her worthless." The room went utterly still. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Brandon staggered back, his confidence crumbling. She was your—" "Yes." Enzo's voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of judgment. "The janitor you humiliated is Elena Rossi. My wife." Brandon's mind reeled. He remembered her face now. The quiet dignity, the downcast eyes, the way she'd silently wiped the marble as his executives laughed. He'd forgotten her the moment she left the room, but now her memory burned like acid. Enzo stood, gathering the papers before him with precise movements. "You called her dirt," he said softly, "but dirt feeds the roots that hold everything up. You built your fortune on that same floor she cleaned." He paused, then placed one more document on the table, a letter of resignation, already signed by the remaining board. "Effective immediately," Enzo said. "You are relieved of all executive authority. Falcon Dynamics will be absorbed and restructured under Eterna Group management." Brandon's voice cracked. "You're destroying me. This is personal." Enzo turned to face him fully. For the first time, there was a flicker of emotion in his tone. Not anger, not satisfaction, but something colder, cleaner. "This isn't destruction," he said. "This is cleaning." He took a slow breath. "You built your empire with our materials. Rossi concrete in your towers. Rossi shipping lines in your ports. Rossi labor in your contracts. Even the floors you walked on. Rossi marble. You stood tall because we let you." Brandon's jaw trembled. "Then why wait until now?" Enzo leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Because mercy deserves to be remembered. You forgot it." He buttoned his jacket, signaling the end of the conversation. The investors didn't speak. None dared. They simply watched as Enzo walked toward the door with the quiet grace of a man leaving a funeral. Before he stepped out, he paused by the open doorway. A janitor stood there, mop in hand, head bowed respectfully as he stepped aside to let Enzo pass. Enzo glanced at the man, then looked back at Brandon one last time. "She deserved respect," he said, his tone like the toll of a distant bell. "That's all." Then he left. No threats, no grand exit, just silence and the faint echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. For a long moment, no one moved. Brandon stood frozen in the center of the boardroom, breathing hard. His gaze fell to the contract Enzo had left on the table, the company seal glinting under the harsh lights. He sank into his chair, the weight of his downfall finally crushing him. All his power, all his arrogance, all his laughter, gone, stripped away by a man who never raised his voice, never fired a bullet. He looked at the empty doorway, heart pounding in disbelief. The janitor outside began mopping again, the rhythmic swish of the water echoing through the boardroom. Brandon stared blankly at the clean, shining floor beneath his feet. The same floor he'd once spilled champagne on, the same floor where he'd laughed at a woman who deserved better. Now, for the first time, he saw his reflection in it, small, trembling, and utterly defeated. The marble was spotless. A month later, the city skyline gleamed a little brighter. The chaos had quieted. The gossip had turned into whispers. And the tower, once known for arrogance and cruelty, stood reborn. The gold letters above the lobby doors no longer read Falcon Dynamics. They had been replaced with a new nameplate, polished, elegant, simple, marble crest holdings, a Rossi enterprise. The building smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. The marble floors glistened under soft morning light, spotless and silent, as if the ghosts of its past had finally been swept away. Elena Rossi stepped through the revolving doors for her morning shift. Her gray uniform looked the same, but somehow it felt different, like armor instead of shame. The lobby was quiet now. No executives yelling into phones, no champagne spills, no laughter at someone else's expense. The new management had replaced the old staff. The cruel ones were gone, the ones who mocked, recorded, and sneered. Her mop glided across the floor with calm precision. Every stroke felt like closure. Two receptionists whispered nearby. "They say some construction tycoon bought the company overnight," one said, lowering her voice. "Yeah," the other replied. "Whole thing went private. No one even saw the deal coming. Heard he's connected, the kind of man people don't cross." Elena smiled faintly, eyes on her reflection in the marble. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Peace, she had learned, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just settles, like dust after a storm. That evening, the apartment smelled of rosemary and garlic. Elena paused at the doorway, surprised to see Enzo at the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot with quiet focus. The table was already set. Wine glasses, candles, the soft hum of Italian music playing from an old radio. "You cooked?" she asked, setting her bag down. He glanced over his shoulder, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I thought we could use a calm night." She walked closer, watching him pour sauce over the pasta, the motion smooth and deliberate, the same control that once moved empires, now cooking dinner in their modest kitchen. "You didn't have to do anything," she said softly. He turned, meeting her eyes. "I didn't," he said. "I just cleaned a floor that was getting too dirty." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she smiled. The kind of smile that forgives, that understands more than words ever could. Dinner was quiet, filled with the small sounds of cutlery and the city outside. The world had returned to its rhythm, unaware of the storm that had passed through it. Elena reached for her glass. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "the lobby looks beautiful now. It feels lighter." Enzo looked up, his expression unreadable but content. "It should," he said. "It finally has the right name on it." She tilted her head. "And what name is that?" He smiled faintly. "Yours." They finished their meal in silence, the candlelight flickering gently between them. No more boardrooms, no more humiliation, no more vengeance, just peace. The kind that's earned, not given. Outside, the city lights reflected against the tower's new nameplate, Marble Crest Holdings, a Rossi enterprise. Inside, the feared ghost of the underworld sat across from his queen, sharing dinner like any ordinary man. No threats, no power plays, no blood, just love, quiet and unshakable. The kind of love that cleans the world, one floor at a time. Time moved on, as it always does. The city forgot the headlines, the scandals, the collapses, but it never forgot the silence that followed them. It was the kind of silence that felt deliberate, watchful, earned. Falcon Dynamics no longer existed. In its place stood Marble Crest Holdings, a division within the vast Rossi network, one of many polished fronts masking an empire of unseen hands. Its profits were clean, its books immaculate, its halls vinely free of arrogance. Brandon Hale vanished. Some said he fled to Europe, others whispered that he'd gone mad, muttering about ghosts who bought his soul with paperwork instead of bullets. No one searched too hard. Men like him always disappeared, eventually. Elena Rossi still came to work every morning. The janitor's cart rolled through the spotless lobby like it always had, mop and bucket gleaming under the soft light. Only now, when she passed, people greeted her. "Good morning, Mrs. Rossi. Thank you, Mrs. Rossi." No one mocked her anymore. No one filmed her when she slipped on wet tiles. The executives spoke softly around her, not out of fear, but out of respect they couldn't quite explain. They only knew that the new owner valued her, though none dared ask why. Elena never told them. She didn't need to. Some truths live better in silence. At home, the nights were calmer now. The tension that once lingered between her and Enzo had melted into something deeper, unspoken understanding. He was rarely home before midnight. When he was, he would sit by the window, glass of whiskey untouched, phone silent beside him. His empire moved through whispers and invisible transactions, yet his presence was steady, like gravity, quiet but inescapable. One evening, Elena found him there, the city lights, painting him in gold and shadow. "You're thinking again?" she said softly, joining him by the window. He smiled faintly. "Thinking keeps the walls standing." She looked out at the skyline, towers glimmering like candles in the distance. "Do you ever wish things were different?" He thought for a moment. Different, no. Quieter, maybe. He turned to her, his eyes softening. "But quiet doesn't mean peace, Elena. Sometimes it just means the war is waiting." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then let it wait a long time." Weeks passed, months even. And soon the world found new names to whisper, new kings, new scandals, new chaos. But somewhere, beneath it all, the ghost of a man who once ruled the city still watched. He didn't rule through fear anymore, but through order, through silence. The kind of silence that cleaned the rot out of a place and left only marble behind. One morning, Elena arrived early. The lobby was empty, sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows. She filled her bucket, wrung the mop, and began to clean, slow, steady strokes across the pristine white floor. For a moment she paused, catching her reflection in the polished marble. The lines of her face were softer now, peaceful. The mop handle gleamed in the light, the gold trim of her name badge catching it just so, like a crown. She smiled to herself, small and knowing. Some wars, she thought, are won without sound. Some kings never raise their voice, and some queens wear janitor uniforms. She dipped the mop again and kept cleaning, as if peace itself depended on it.